Well, good evening or good afternoon, or for those of you in Australia, good morning. My name is Mitch Weisberg, and I'm the host of one of the hosts of Edchat Interactive, one of the founders. And before we get started, I have a few things I'd like to mention. One is we're going to be covering a lot of information tonight with John Hattie about visible learning, but this is more, there's more information here than we ever hoped to spend in an hour. So there are opportunities if you would like to find out more. You could call Corwin, and the number's up here, 800. I'm going to expand these slides a little bit so that you can see them a little bit better. You can call Corwin at 800-831-6640 or email Corwin, and they can arrange for your school or for your district to get a special presentation of visible learning. And then I also want to talk to you a little bit about Edchat Interactive. A lot of you have not been on Edchat Interactive before, and our whole purpose is to share best practices and more the way we all learn. So if you think about it, a typical webinar, you have somebody who's talking for the entire time, and you can pay attention. And it's with somebody like John Hattie, who's an incredible speaker. You can learn a lot. But for most of us, it's better if we have a chance to interact, and that's what we've done with Edchat Interactive. For the most part, we break the sessions up into 15-20 minute chunks and then give you a chance to reflect and use social learning to learn from the other participants. So if we have Edchat Interactives about 6 or 8 times a month. They're free. You've been to our website to sign up for this one, so feel free to sign up for some more. The reason why we can make our Edchat Interactive so interactive is because we're using a platform called Shindig, which is really different from probably any of you have used before. And I just want to go through a few of the features of Shindig. One is the raise hand button, which you'll see on. By using the raise hand button, indicating to me or to Zach Zanino, who's my fellow administrator here tonight, that you want us to contact you for some reason. You may be having a technical problem, or you may have a question that you'd like us to contact you. So the raise hand alerts us that there's some information that you'd like to impart to one of the two of us. The ask button allows you to ask a question that either Zach or I can see. And if you ask a question, we're going to compile questions and then we're going to ask a few of those questions to John during the course of the evening, and hopefully get you answers as well. So let's just try that raise hand button. I'd like to find out how many of you are already familiar with the term visible learning. So if you're already familiar with the term visible learning, please click the raise hand button, and that'll give us an idea where we should start. So I'm looking at the raised hands. There's more. That's good. So it looks to me like about half of you, or maybe a little bit over half of you, are already familiar with the term visible learning. And so rather than start at the very beginning, I think John will probably breeze through a little bit of the definition of visible learning and then go through some of the seminal work. So you can now lower your hands and clicking that raise hand button again. And then for questions, I see that there actually is already a person who has asked a question, and you ask all participants to mute their microphones. So yes, that's probably a good idea, is that if we're speaking and you're in a conversation with somebody else, if you don't mute your microphone, then there's going to be some feedback that the other person hears. So if you're hooked up with another person, I see a couple of you already are, it's probably best if you mute your microphones while we're talking. Which kind of leads into the next area that I'd like to go through. When you highlight your avatar, which is in the lower right-hand corner of your screens, you'll see a menu of 5 different items. The setting button will control your camcorder or your microphone. the mute button is what I mentioned before. If you click on that mute button, then you won't get the feedback. And then the other button I'd like to bring to your attention is the button marked I am. The I am button allows you to have a back channel with the other people in your room. What you immediately see is about 12 to 15 other people, but there's actually about 400 people who are here tonight listening to John. And so if you have interesting comments that you want to make to some of the other people in your room, if you click on that I am button, you'll see a dialog box and you can type in some information. So I'd like you to use that now. I'd like you to get that I am window up. I'm going to shrink the size of this slide a second. So I'd like you to get that I am window up, and I'd like you to put in, where are you from? So type in, the city and country that you're from, so the people in your room can have a pretty good idea of who's here and where you're from. Now, unfortunately, as the administrator, I will not see what you type in the I am box, but the other people in your room will, and it'll help them. And then I also want to say that one of the real reason we use Shindig is this feature that allows you to do video conferencing with others. So what I'd like to do is to give you a chance to meet some of the other people here. So if you have a video a camcorder, and if you have a microphone, if you can click on the icon of somebody else who also has a microphone and video, and the two of you or three of you can get into a conversation. Now, it says 3 minutes. I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to do that. So click on the icon of a person who's here and introduce yourself. Where are you? Where are you from? And what do you do to make learning visible? I'll give you about 2 minutes. I'm going to come down, and then I'll bring myself back up 2 minutes, and we'll proceed with John Hattie.
Now, what this whole notion of visible learning sort of started quite some time ago for me, trying to understand what works best on student achievement. I got sick and tired of the debate about what works, because everybody seems to have an answer, and everybody's answer seemed to be what they were doing was what worked. And what I struggled with, that no one really asked the relative difference between different programs, different influences on student achievement. And whilst I get criticized that I'm focused on achievement, I make no apology for that. I do think it's an important outcome of our schooling. There is a group that in Germany that I'm working with that's doing the same that I've done, but they're looking at emotional and motivational outcomes. David Mitchell published a book about 2 years ago doing the same that I've done, but he specifically looked at special needs students. And we've also just finished a pretty big meta-synthesis where we've looked at how you learn. And that's got a different set of answers, a different story. But I make no excuses that achievement is really critical. And certainly what probably the most surprising thing is when I got up to meta-analyses, I published the Visible Learning book. I'm now up to 1,200. Since I first published on this in 1989, the story hasn't changed. The data's changed. Some people might want to quibble with the data, but nobody at this stage has come up with a different story, and that's my challenge to certainly the academic and teaching community. And probably the thing that was most surprising is that if you look at the influences across those 1,200 meta-analyses, and so far I've got around 300 million students in the sample, and I've got influences from the home, from the family, from the students, from the curriculum, from the teachers, you name it. And so the slide that I'm hoping that you're on now that I can't see is the one that says distribution of effects. I think it's slide number 7. And that slide actually was the one that surprised me, because the red zone are the influences on kids that are less than 0. And as you can see, there's hardly anything. And so my best news of the day is that whatever we do to students enhances their performance. Pretty healthy. In fact, quite a few of those in the red zone make perfect sense. For example, the effect size of bullying on students' achievement is minus 0.2. And so when you take those kind of obvious ones out from the red zone, 95 to 97% of what we do to students enhances their learning. So in that sense, what works? Virtually everything. What I'm interested in is if you look at the average, which is around 0.4. The numbers don't mean so much today. What matters is the relativity. And you can see in that green zone a pretty large proportion of teachers and influences on kids' learning. Obviously, success is all around us. And certainly if I'm asked why visible learning has stayed around a few years, if I could be a modest for a moment, I think part of it is because the premise is that we already have success. We don't have to do like most professional development, assume that it's not working and we're coming in to fix it. We don't have to do like most policies, where we say one size fits all. Well, clearly, for those in the green zone, permission to keep doing what you're doing, with one exception. I'd like to see principals and school leaders have the courage to identify the success all around them and build that in as their collaboration to make sure that that is the coalition of the success. And then the argument underlying the visible learning model is then we just invite those in the purple zone to come in and join those in the green zone. And that's certainly what I've been doing over the last 10, 15 years. I've worked with some pretty stunning people to now interpret that in schools. And here in America, we're working Corwin to do that. And whilst, as you can imagine, I'm a bit of a talker, I'm an academic, those people have worked out how to make a difference. And across the world, we're working in around 5,000 schools, implementing the model of visible learning that starts with that premise. Where is that coalition of success? Now, the theme I'm using is know they impact, and that begs the three impact questions. The first is, do we have a common understanding in this school about what impact means? What does a year's growth look like for a year's input? What does a teacher having impact in the green zone, what is the impact they're having on kids? And it's really important in a school that you have that debate. The answer isn't as simple as using test scores. It's not as simple as using effect sizes. It's not as simple as using student voice. It's not as simple as using artifacts of kids' work. It's the bringing together of all those things to put on the table what the teacher's judgments are about impact. Because certainly my data says loud and clear, it shouldn't be the case that every time a student hits a new teacher, it's random whether that kid goes up or down, depending on that teacher's conception of what they mean by impact. So that's the first question. What do we mean by impact? The second question is, what is the magnitude? Because as you can see on that graph, anybody almost can get impact. I have a teacher who comes to you and says, look, this is the kid's performance at the start of the year, here's their performance at the end of the year. Those are the teachers I have the biggest problems with. And so I think we can understand a few of why they're at the bottom there. Now if I go to the next slide, you can see some in the middle. Now, these are typical kind of effect sizes around the 0.23 mark. That's still something I can't get too excited about. You know, computers are in there. Everyone knows the computer revolution's coming. It's been coming for 50 years. That effect size hasn't changed for 50 years. And I think we do understand why it hasn't had a large effect. It's because most teachers don't teach in a way where computers really make a difference. They just substitute with what the teacher's doing before. They use Google instead of using encyclopedias. Now, nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't truly make the difference. Indeed, a lot of our own work at the moment, we're finding quite a big difference using computers when you use the social media aspect. Like we know using kind of programs like Edmodo, Facebook kinds of programs, that getting kids to ask each other questions and asking the teacher questions dramatically increases when they're using the social media. So there are ways we can use it for knowledge production. And if I go to the next slide, if I go back, stay on that one for a moment and look at principals. No, they're not there, they're missed off. Well, principals have, they're principal school leaders, number 74. You can see principals have a bit of a below average effect. I know that may upset a few of you. And certainly my colleague Vivian Robinson got upset. So if you go to the next slide here to Transformational Instructional, she did a study where she compared what she called transformational leaders, which is around 80 to 90% of school leaders. They want to set a vision, they want equal access, equitable resources, they want to give teachers the time and the autonomy to do what they like. And she contrasted that with what she called the instructional leader, the leader that worries about the impact, worries about the test scores, worries about the classroom observation. And when you actually look at the effect size, which is the next slide, you can see it's a dramatic difference. Transformational leaders, quite frankly, get out of our schools. You're doing damage. Yes, maybe you need to be transformational before you can be instructional. But the message for principals is clear. Your job is to worry about the effect your teachers, your adults in the school are having on your students. And where you're finding great impact, permission for those teachers to continue, as long as they also become part of the collective efficacy of the school to really make a difference and invite those other teachers in. Let's go to some of the more average ones, starting with peer influences. And you can see there, teacher expectations are in there, small group, giving kids second and third chance program, classroom management, peers teaching and influencing each other's in there. But let's go up further, amongst the winners. And here's where I want to start making the visible learning story very clear. What the message is that if you start by showing students what success looks like as they start a series of lessons, then you're more likely to get them part of the learning equation. Some students will do things regardless, but some students, particularly the ages around 11, 12 and 13, start to say, well, if I don't understand the purpose of what I'm learning this stuff, I don't understand what it means to be successful. What does it mean to be good at what I'm doing? They start to drift away. And if you collect all the effects around success criteria, they're around about 0.8, showing kids what success looks like. It's no different for us as adults in professional development. If we understand how we're going to be successful when we implement something, we're more likely to implement it. And you can see their worked examples, for example, showing kids what an A and a B and a C is as they start work is very, very powerful. And if you go to the last slide of the winners, you can see the new number one in the Visible Learning book, self-reported grades there. And this is the notion that students are very, very perceptive. They know before they do a test how well they're going to perform. In many ways, that says, why on earth do we administer tests in classroom if they already know how they're going to do? But certainly I would argue that the main reason you do testing in classroom is feedback to you, to the teacher. And if you go in with that mindset that my job in any assessment is to find out what I taught well, who I taught well, and was it efficient in terms of time, not only do you create better and different tests, you get a lot of feedback, and then the students are the beneficiaries. But if you go to the new number one, which is teacher collective efficacy, in many ways it kind of confirms the visible learning model of getting teachers to have the confidence that they can change the learning lives of all the students in front of them. But it's that collect work. And so principals, you have a very powerful job here to make sure that happens and stop all that deficit thinking and that naysaying. And stop that kind of argument that, oh, we can't teach these students, we haven't got the right time, we haven't got the right resources, we haven't got the right curriculum, we've got too much assessment. Hey, we've got a whole lot of teachers already in that purple zone before that are already doing it under those conditions already. And you can go down that chart, providing formative evaluation back to you, the teachers. Micro-teaching. Like, I think it's a sin to go into a class and watch another teacher teach. But wow, you should go into that class and help those teachers see their impact. Like, if you look at the research on classroom observation, what teachers see when they see in classes, 80% of what happens in the class you don't see or hear. So how can you get more resources and more skills and ways of doing it? And I'm not talking about a principal sitting in the back of the room tick boxing on some observation. I'm talking about having discussions in light of observation about your impact on students.
But if the people on this webinar who have been so kind, if the people on this webinar who have been so kind to muddle through the technology issues, if they could know something that you think is most important to know about this research, what would you tell them?
I think I've just done that, Kristen, so I'm going to turn it back on you. Who are you?
So hello, my name is Kristen Anderson. I am the Senior Director of Professional Learning for Corwin, and my role is to take this great research and help bring it to life through extraordinary professional learning experiences and to help make this work practical in the field. And I know that after hearing this research, a lot of people, you can't argue with the research. It's incredibly compelling, and it definitely makes us think about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and maybe what we should be doing less or more of. And so I know the next practical question is, well, what next? After I hear these messages, what do I do next? And
Kristen, that's probably the question. I come into the camera.
Yep.
That's probably the question I get asked most, and that is, where do we start?